The spaceship Avalon is cruising through space, bound for the colonized world of Homestead 2. The ship is on autopilot, and the 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers are in deep hibernation. Suddenly, Avalon enters an asteroid belt, which weakens its shields. The ship redirects power to protect itself, but a massive asteroid collides with it, causing multiple malfunctions. As the ship begins automatic repairs, one hibernation pod unexpectedly activates. Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer, wakes up. The system informs him he's been in suspended animation for 120 years, with only 4 months left until they reach Homestead 2. He's told he can enjoy the ship's luxurious amenities during the wait. Jim receives instructions for his ID band, cabin, and activities to occupy his time before arrival. Nervous and excited, he leaves his cabin and enters an automated learning class. The hologram explains that Earth has become overpopulated, expensive, and unappealing. As Jim tries to ask why he's the only one awake, the hologram can't answer. Confused, he sets off to search for other people and heads to the ship's main concourse. Jim finds no one in the concourse either, but an automated info desk offers assistance. He asks to speak to a real person, and it directs him to a steward, but no one is there. Frustrated, Jim asks to see the captain, but when he reaches the bridge, he can see that the entire crew is still in hibernation. He eventually goes to the observatory and discovers a shocking truth. The ship is still 90 years away from Homestead 2. Realizing he woke up far too early, Jim panics. He rushes back to send a message to Earth, asking for help, but the system informs him that the reply would take 55 years to arrive, and it would be costly. Jim is devastated. Wandering the ship, he finds the bar and meets a bartender. But something seems off, and Jim soon realizes the bartender, named Arthur, is actually an android. Jim tries to get answers, but Arthur doesn't understand how Jim woke up so early. The next day, Jim wakes up in his cabin and heads to the cantina, where he learns most of the ship's amenities are locked for passengers. He grabs a plain coffee and starts trying to fix his hibernation pod. After gathering tools and working on the pod, Jim lies inside, hoping it will work, yet nothing happens. Jim decides to use his tools to access the crew's hibernation chambers, but that doesn't work either. Meanwhile, small malfunctions continue to pop up around the ship. He keeps going to the bar, not just for drinks, but for company, talking to Arthur the android. Arthur suggests that Jim should break into a gold-class room and enjoy the ship's luxuries, which Jim does. He indulges in the fancy restaurants, games, and entertainment system, but despite it all, his loneliness grows. One night, drunk and wandering around the hibernation pods, Jim stumbles upon an airlock with spacesuits for spacewalks. He suits up, heads to the airlock, and steps outside. The view is breathtaking. Jim is the only conscious person to experience the vastness of space. He turns off the magnets in his boots, floating freely, but the weight of his isolation leaves him feeling devastated. After returning inside and removing the suit, Jim goes back to the airlock, contemplating ending it all. He pulls the lever, but changes his mind at the last second, running back inside, where he slips on a bottle. As he stands, his attention is captured by a woman in one of the hibernation pods. Her name is Aurora. Intrigued, Jim searches for Aurora's files and listens to her passenger interview, quickly becoming infatuated. Later, he's seen sitting by her pod, still listening to her interviews. Back at the bar, Jim reads some of her work and talks to Arthur about her writing, further deepening his connection to her. Jim becomes consumed by the cruel irony of his situation, traveling to another planet for a new life, waking up too soon and finding his perfect woman, only for her to remain out of reach. His thoughts keep circling back to Aurora, and he begins considering waking her up. He discusses it with Arthur, but the android doesn't grasp the moral dilemma. Jim knows that waking her would condemn her to the same fate, trapped on the ship with him, likely to die there. At first, he decides against it, but over time, he can't shake the idea. Finally, he gives in and activates Aurora's pod. As she goes through the same disorienting awakening process Jim did, he hides and returns to his room. Later, he finds her in the concourse, confused and lost, just as he had been a year before. Jim explains that they are the only ones awake and takes her to the observatory. He tells her that he has no way of accessing the crew or the ship's main controls. Aurora panics and insists on returning to her pod. At the pod, Jim breaks the news that the ship lacks the equipment to put them back into hibernation. Realizing they are stranded, they return to the concourse, where Jim suggests she rest after just waking up. Aurora begins to feel sympathy for Jim, understanding the loneliness he must have endured being alone on the ship for over a year. Jim returns to the bar, filled with regret for waking Aurora. He asks Arthur not to reveal that he was the one who woke her up. The next day, Aurora awakens again and goes to the concourse, where she inquires at the info desk about the hibernation pods. Jim joins her, and they head for breakfast. As they leave, the info desk malfunctions. At the cantina, Aurora notices that Jim has been eating the same basic meal for over a year, so she gets him something from the gold class menu. They discuss fixing the hibernation pods, but unlike Jim, Aurora isn't ready to give up. She searches the infirmary and goes through the research documents, eventually trying to break into the crew's hibernation quarters. Meanwhile, Jim notices more malfunctions occurring throughout the ship. As time passes, Aurora becomes more aware of her trapped existence on the Avalon. She writes, jogs, and swims in the pool, but the reality of their isolation starts weighing on her. One day, Aurora interviews Jim, thinking his story could be interesting. She asks why he decided to immigrate to the colony. At first, Jim responds with company slogans, but he eventually opens up, explaining that he hoped to be somebody and build a new life on the new world. Later, in the observatory, Aurora opens up and reveals her reason for being on the ship. Unlike the other passengers, she had a round-trip ticket. Her goal was to go to Homestead 2, live there for a year, and return to Earth to write a groundbreaking story as the first journalist to do so. As Aurora begins to lose hope of fixing their situation, Jim tries to lift her spirits. He takes her dancing, to the cinema, and even to the basketball court. Finally, they visit the bar to meet Arthur. Aurora relaxes briefly, but the reality of their predicament soon returns. Jim is left alone with Arthur, feeling the weight of what he's done. Later, Jim is seen tinkering with something, and Aurora discovers a miniature Chrysler building he made for her in the observatory, a symbol of Earth and her dreams. Sometime after that, they go on a date at the bar, sharing dinner and stories about their pasts. Aurora confides that her father died when she was a teenager. After dinner, Jim takes Aurora to the airlock, and they suit up for a spacewalk together. For the first time, Jim has someone to share the awe-inspiring experience of floating in space, no longer feeling so alone. Jim turns off the magnets on their boots, and they float together in space. When they return inside, they kiss passionately and retreat to his cabin, where they sleep together. Soon, they start living as a couple. Aurora moves into Jim's cabin and begins writing about her life on the ship. They jog, eat, and sleep together. Jim continues exploring the ship and discovers the hydroponics bay, bringing Aurora flowers from it. One day, they watch a red giant star pass by from the observatory. Later, they celebrate Aurora's birthday with dinner at one of the ship's restaurants and drinks at the bar. While Aurora chats with Arthur, Jim sneaks off to the washroom to prepare the ring he made to propose. But Arthur accidentally reveals Jim's secret. He was the one who woke her up. Shocked and betrayed, Aurora confronts Jim as he returns. Furious and panicked, Aurora runs away. When Jim returns to his cabin, he finds all of her belongings gone. The next day, he spots her in the cantina, but when he tries to speak, she quickly runs away again. Aurora becomes desperate. One night, in a fit of rage, she storms into Jim's cabin, punching and kicking him, furious enough to want to kill him. Jim, speaking to her over the comm system because she avoids him otherwise, tries to apologize and explain why he woke her. He admits he fell in love with her, but Aurora doesn't care. She can't forgive him for stealing her future. One night, while Jim is in his cabin, another major malfunction occurs. The ship faces a critical error, and the main command shuts down. Later, as Jim steps into the elevator, it malfunctions too. Aurora, walking through the concourse, notices a tree Jim has planted there. She heads to the cantina, where the food dispensary is malfunctioning as well. Suddenly, both hear a voice over the comms. It's the deck chief, Gus Mancuso, asking who planted the tree. They rush to the concourse and find Mancuso standing in front of it. They introduce themselves and explain the strange situation with their pods. Mancuso is confused and says it's highly unusual for 3 pods to fail. He takes them to the bridge and uncovers that something is seriously wrong with the ship. However, the ship's systems must be checked manually to figure it out. As they leave the bridge, a robot nearly falls on them, and Jim and Aurora inform Mancuso that malfunctions have been happening frequently. He's puzzled, saying that shouldn't be happening, and shows them how to collect system data. Mancuso later checks on the pods, with Jim joining him, still trying to unravel the mystery. Mancuso discovers what happened to Aurora's pod and is horrified by Jim's actions. Later, while reviewing the ship's data on the bridge, Aurora joins him, and they discuss her pod. But Mancuso tells her he can't change what happened. Jim arrives with another broken robot, and Mancuso, feeling ill from hibernation sickness, leaves to rest, coughing up blood as he goes. That night, Aurora can't sleep and goes for a swim. Suddenly, the ship loses gravity, and she nearly drowns as the water floats with her. The gravity drive resets just in time, and she escapes. The next day, Jim and Aurora run into each other while looking for Mancuso. Together, they discover on the bridge that a major system failure happened 2 years ago. Mancuso explains that if they don't fix the problem soon, the entire ship will fail. While searching for the issue, Mancuso faints, and Jim and Aurora take him to the infirmary, where they learn he's dying with no cure available. Later, in the observatory, Mancuso gives Jim his ID bracelet, urging them to fix the ship before he dies. Moments after his death, the ship's lights turn red, and it begins to shake, signaling another critical failure. Jim tells Aurora he needs her help, and they rush to engineering, but a gravity drive failure occurs, followed by a malfunction affecting Arthur. Jim deactivates the android. They reach engineering and discover the problem in the power plant. As they open the hatch, Aurora gets sucked into a breach caused by the asteroid. Jim is pulled in as well, holding on to the hatch before getting sucked in. Together, they manage to seal the breach, but Jim quickly realizes there are more. Following the meteor's path, they find it hit the reactor control computer. Jim believes they can replace the damaged parts, and they do, but venting the reactor still fails. Attempting it manually also fails. Jim concludes that he must open the vent door from outside the ship to cool the reactor. As they prepare in the airlock, he gives Aurora Mancuso's bracelet, knowing he might not survive the task. Aurora is pulled back, but manages to grab Jim's tether and pull him in. She drags him to the infirmary, only to find that he's already dead. Using Mancuso's bracelet, she overrides the medical protocols, and the pod automatically resuscitates Jim. Afterward, Aurora forgives him. She later repairs Arthur, and together they give Mancuso a proper space burial. Jim then takes Aurora to the infirmary and reveals a way to modify the medical pod to function as a hibernation chamber, offering her the chance to sleep through the rest of the journey. However, she chooses to stay awake with him. Jim eventually proposes, and they live out their lives together on the ship. 88 years later, the Avalon arrives at Homestead 2. The crew awakens to find the ship transformed, with a message from Aurora recounting the life she and Jim shared while the others slept. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more videos like this.